What makes this year's summit different from previous years?
This year it gets even better because of Dale's and Dale's messaging narrative. We have a strong narrative on Africa, and that narrative is really what it's working. Deals, we've seen many oil and gas deals being done in the continent, which is benefiting Africans. But even bigger than that, African nations and African independents are doing well. Nigeria has more independence than many European countries. You see them here, they are participating and they're getting a lot of stuff done. But you know what's even better? We have a lot more African governments now really being pragmatic. How do you think about oil? It's not us versus them. It's that how do we incentivize oil exploration? How do we incentivize growth? Because we came out of an era where oil was a bad thing. We shouldn't talk about the oil and gas industry. We should talk only about renewables. I think this AEW re-emphasized our commitment to building baseload energy, fighting energy poverty, using oil and natural gas to be part of Africa's development. And I'm excited about this.
And it's interesting you talk about renewables because the theme for this year emphasizes Africa's energy independence as well as a transition. So how do you reconcile this global push that might be, finding its way back now, given some of the things we're hearing from the international energy associations and things like that? But how do you reconcile the global push for renewables with Africa's immediate need for oil and gas revenue and oil and gas usage?
Well, we have an all-of-the-above energy strategy, and that's what we really need. The IEA made a big blunder. They politicized energy analysis, and they said stop oil and stop oil investment and stop everything. That was wrong, and now they've changed their outlook, saying we need $570 billion a year in oil investment. I think we need about $900 billion because a lot more exploration needs to be done in Africa. The problem with energy is that when we politicize energy, becomes a problem. We have to take a look at 1 billion Africans that don't have access to clean cooking and 6 to almost 700 million with access to energy. That is a critical issue of today, and we have to, we at the Chamber believe we in Africa just need to have an all of the above energy strategy, because when you have that all of the above energy strategy, you use oil, you use natural gas, you use coal, you use renewables, you use everything to get our people back. But we can't say we abandon everything and wait for renewables. The sun won't shine forever, the wind won't blow forever. You might need natural gas to power your development. No nation has ever been developed by renewables alone. None. So we have, it's not right to tell Africans that at a time when we feel we can develop right now. You said, well, we use coal, we use oil, we use gas to develop. Africans, no, just stop oil. I think to say just stop oil is not to Africans saying just stop life, because you know what? Take, for example, a country like Nigeria, 90 million people without electricity, mostly in the north. If you use natural gas, guess what's going to happen? You could power the country, you could build fertilizer plants, feed with fertilizer, we feed people, and we don't rely on aid for everything we do.
So when you look at this, critics often say that you focus too much on oil and gas, and you've already said that, of course, renewables will not last forever, but where is the place of renewables, especially as the African Energy Chamber? It's not specific to oil and gas, so where is the place for renewables, and how do you prepare for a transition that many say is eventually going to come?
Life has always been about transitions, but let me tell you this. When President Biden came in 2020 in America, their usage of oil and gas, 82% of the electricity capacity. 2025, 82%. They've not reduced. So they have developed in the wealthy nations. They should decarbonize, they should use more renewables. We need baseload energy, so we need to use more fossil fuels to industrialize and get our people out of poverty. Of course you want renewables, but the promises they've always told us around renewables, they just don't keep those promises. Broken promises, one after another. We went to COP, they said they're going to give $100 billion, which is nothing for all these poor countries. What happens? We've not seen a dime. So you want to tell me I abandon my resources and focus on something you can't finance, but then we shouldn't be waiting for aid. But you have $400 billion of green bonds that were done between 2020 to 2024, you know how much got into this continent? Less than 3%. They're not financing Africa's renewables. We have the sun, we have the wind. Why are we not getting the financing there? So we're going to have to do it by ourselves. Like I always say, Wakanda Forever is a good movie, but the Black Panther is not coming. If we're going to have to do renewables, you need to get money out of oil and then use that money. We could set aside money from oil, use that funds to really drive up renewables ourselves. That's when we do, and we really get renewables that is really African-led. Why don't we build a supply chain around renewables in Africa? The copper is here, so you know what? Let's finance our mining, our copper mining, lithium, platinum, use that, use the technologies they have if they really want to drive that in Africa, and we build a supply chain in Africa. We can't just live from one form of energy to another form where we have to be dependent on other people all the time. Africa cannot be a market where you just depend on others. It doesn't help us.
I believe this year was the first year you had the Russia-Africa Summit, and then you also have the U.S.-Africa Investment Summit as well. So two geopolitical powers competing for Africa's attention. How do you think all of that played out? What were the promises or the recommendations? What came of these two summits, especially as it has to do with oil and gas on the continent?
I think it plays very well. We're part of the non-aligned movement. That's what we Africans always been, and I don't see any difference with us talking to Russia or talking to America. Nelson Mandela taught us that your enemies don't have to be our enemies, so we work with everybody. With Russians, I think they've done very well with gas monetization that African countries like Nigeria, Ghana, Mozambique can learn. They went from being net importers of food to be net exporters because they use gas to power agricultural bases. The Americans have used gas right now supplying Europe, but also you use gas to build the future, which we're going to see. We should be thinking about using gas to build big data centers, building AI that our young people are going to drive that in the future. We can't be behind on all of those things. So you know what? If we're behind, we are going to be playing the catch-up game all the time, and Africa needs to be ahead of it and not be playing the catch-up game all the time. So we welcome interest from everywhere. We had interest from Saudi Arabia, we had Chinese representation, and that should be what we need to do. We need to work with all parties, but we also need to see how we harness $2.7 trillion of private capital in Africa. That we need to harness that and really drive that. We have the Intra-Africa Free Trade Act. It's not working. We're still paying tariffs and we're still dealing with that. We need to harmonize how we deal with visas. It is horrible that in this continent, it's easy for someone to come from Europe into Africa, work in the energy business, than an African working within that. So we should be even be looking at local content differently and start thinking about having Africa content, because there's some talents in Nigeria that is going to be needed in Mozambique. There's some talents in Ghana that could be used in Sierra Leone. We should cut down these barriers for Africans to work together.
All right, final question, NJ, before I let you go. What message are you sending to investors about Africa's bankability and readiness?
Africa is ready. Their returns on investing in the Gulf of Mexico is less than in Africa. Big returns, big times, and if there's one continent where you get super returns, find no place else but Africa. That's why we are working very hard to be the best place to do business.